So that was, we just involved, we came in person. That was very cool. It was actually, we did like a big house tour, and it was with you guys, and we had.
Yes.
So this one here is Dave Morgan, we're just gonna need a motion to accept his resignation.
Oh, really?
Alright, we're live.
Okay.
We're live.
Motion to accept.
We're looking for like,
Get 20 point under.
find out what organization.
Son had to
I'd like to call to order a meeting of the Summers Board of Selectmen for March 17th, 2022. Let's say St. Patrick's Day. Before we get started, I'd like to start with a Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So, first of all, I'd just like to introduce, on my right is Selectman Bill Meyer, on my left is Selectman Bob Schmidt. We also have our CFO, Mike Marinaccio, and our Assistant Finance Director, Brian Wissinger. Let's see. So with regards to public comment, do we have any public comment this evening? I don't believe so. Thank you. We have no executive session, none planned. And presentations by the first selectman, I have no particular presentations. With regards to the consent agenda under boards and commissions, at our last Board of Selectmen meeting held last week, I mentioned and read the communication from David Morgan, who expressed his interest in resigning immediately from the cemetery committee. And I also read the response I sent to him. He's been a valuable member for several years. He's basically resigning because of his business interests in Portland, Maine, require him to spend extra time up there, and he can't be here for the meetings, basically, so that's the reason. So we need a motion to accept the resignation of David Morgan from the Cemetery Commission Committee.
I'm happy to make that motion for us to accept the resignation of David Morgan from the Cemetery Committee.
I'll second that.
Great. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. We have an opportunity for urgent agenda items. I don't believe we have any of those tonight.
I have none.
Under finance report, we have any transfers or amendments? I don't believe so. CFO, does he have any comments he wants to make?
The only thing I have is I handed out to the other selectmen the proposed budget that was presented to the Board of Finance
Thank you.
Tuesday evening.
2 days ago.
2 days ago. It has both the Board of Ed and the town and the revenue portions of that budget, so they can look at that.
Thank you. Approval of scheduled payments. Payment authorization list. We need a motion for the total.
Yeah. And be happy to make a motion for us to the approval of the payment of $168,281.60.
I think it's 218.
Oh, okay, I got a different one here. Okay, I'm sorry. I have a.
You just use this one here.
All right.
What's that?
I got it. This is a different one.
Oh, did I?
You gave me a different one.
I did?
Yeah, and then, but I ran this one off at home.
Oh.
That was from last week.
Oh.
Oh, okay.
Really?
Sorry.
Sorry.
All right, so I'll retract that. I apologize.
Thank you.
You did. Okay, now I got the right one in front of me, yeah. So I'd like to make a motion that, we approve the payment authorization for, Thursday, March 2022, of, $218,691.18.
I will second that for discussion.
Okay, good, yeah, good. So, any discussion here, I believe, I've got a few myself, go ahead, Selectman Meyer.
So my first one, I see a large payment to, David McCaffrey on page 4.
I think you might have last week's, actually.
Is that, I mean, I see here that's 168,281.
Yeah, that's last week.
That's last
You
week.
have the wrong one also, apparently.
Oh, I have the wrong one.
Sorry.
Sorry.
I don't, I
That was
think,
the one
did
you
you send it to
approved
me?
last
I
There we-
printed
You
the last
did,
one
yeah,
I got.
That
this
was
is the one that you
Oh, I
sent.
didn't send, did I
I
not?
feel like last week was 90,000
I got this one 'cause you sent this late yesterday, about 4 o'clock.
Yeah,
or
I sent it
something.
about 4 o'clock.
Yeah,
yesterday.
that's the one I got, yeah.
Oh, whoops. Sorry, guys.
That's okay.
This is,
That's the current one.
today's, yeah.
Okay.
Well, I've got a few questions. First
ahead.
of all, I did have a question about, a check for $700 to Mad Science of Western New England. I had to ask a question about that.
Yeah, it's a recreation program that's happening. I don't know all the details of it, but I know it's some recreation program
Department,
that
right.
she's putting on.
I also had a question about the, Fawcett O'Neill, payment for $3,200 on page 2.
Yeah, stormwater monitoring.
That's a quarterly monitoring we do at the old landfill, required to like.
Right, thank you. And I noted there's a payment to Pete's Tire Barns for $6,591.55.
Roadside mower,
Is that what it
some
was?
tires for the roadside mower.
I knew it was I knew it was tires. but I
Roadside
didn't know
what?
The roadside mower, the,
Mower.
large piece of equipment we mow all of the roadsides with in the summertime.
That's for one set of tires?
Yeah. That's not bad.
$7,6,500.
I know oil went up, but
And,
that's ridiculous.
I also noted on here a, payment to, Stadronsky and Meter LLC, it's a law firm, for $7,552.50. I thought it might be just worth mentioning that this is, an attorney that the town has hired for litigation purposes for tax assessment appeals that relate to auto assessments and, the solar farm on Bilton Road. That's just an ongoing, expense. And then we have another one for, Weston and Sampson Engineers for $30,600. I know this is to support the WPCA, study, I believe, right?
That's correct.
And is that, the question is that's a partial payment for, a design they're putting together, or is that a total payment?
It's a partial payment.
Yeah. So originally we were told that there'd be an initial design phase that might cost $100,000. We still,
We have a change order in front of us for our April 1st meeting. That's gonna take it up to about 160 total for the study
okay,
and
thank you.
recommendations.
So the answer is, they expect about $160,000 that'll be needed to pay for the design phase of the improvements necessary for the Summersville wastewater treatment plant.
Correct.
Thank you. Yeah, those are the questions I had.
I guess my question there, that large payment I referenced, to one of our,
Directors.
directors, I mean, I assume that's to just correct the arrears that we had discussed
Correct.
previously. I just wanna make sure that going forward, we're not gonna be doing reimbursements like that. I mean, it should be a requisition.
Yep.
Directly through finance and a disbursement through a
Tim.
check.
Tim and myself sat down with Dave
Okay.
and explained it all and
Okay.
told him we could not continue to,
No problem.
handle it in that matter. So
Okay.
it has been addressed
Okay.
and, hopefully it's corrected.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of, the authorized payment schedule as proposed?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes.
has the
Here's
sheet.
the page right here, here we go. Go ahead and sign that. Sure. Make sure we sign the right one here. Not last week.
Brian didn't send that
Yeah,
tonight.
that's a good point.
Well, you asked me if you were gonna send it to him, I said, yeah.
Yeah, but
Okay.
usually put me on it, so I can. Makes me look bad.
Well, the thing is, she gave me this one, and then I ran yours off.
Anywho.
Okay, thank you. Updates from boards and commissions, I don't believe we have any of those. Pending business, I don't think we have any of that either. New business. Discussion and potential action on appointment of the Youth Services Bureau Advisory Board and term ordinance. You're on. Director of Services, Social Services, Allison Maynard. Go ahead.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So, at this point, I honestly am not sure what the next step is. I've presented to you my recommendations for the advisory board members. We've now heard public comment, so my hope is that we can move forward with appointing these individuals, to be our Youth Services Advisory Board with the term ending on, December 22nd of 2022, and then they would get into the normal rotation of being reappointed every 2 years, I believe, is what we were in ordinance.
So we would adopt the ordinance tonight, and then the effective date would be April 3rd, and then after the ordinance becomes effective, that's when we would be able to appoint.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right,
So tonight will be just the adoption of the ordinance.
okay. And
Yeah.
then when would they be appointed?
At the first meeting of the board after April 3rd, so whatever that.
Okay.
The first Thursday in
Thursday,
April.
I think
Okay,
we do the sixth
great.
or seventh.
The 6th of the Wednesday, so it'll be
The
the 7th.
seventh.
The
So we-
7th?
yeah.
Okay,
That's
great,
not too bad.
no.
So I would just say work with Kim to get them on the agenda so they're ready to go, like on our
Sure.
actual agenda.
Yeah,
And we can do them on consent, so we don't have to read every one,
okay.
you know, and then,
Sure.
and just make the
Yeah,
appointments.
great.
Okay.
Good.
Are you gonna
Great.
do staggered terms for them, or will everybody
No.
have the same start and finish date, or?
I believe everybody will have the same start and
Okay.
finish,
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah.
That's what we got.
Okay.
This has been proposed.
Yeah. Okay. All right, wonderful.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. So we need a motion to adopt.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So I'd like to make a motion to adopt the Youth Service Bureau Advisory Board and term ordinance with a publication date of March 19th, 2022, and effective date of April 3rd, 2022.
I'll second the motion.
Any further discussion? All those, go ahead.
I don't have the charter in front of me, but if you could revise the motion so that, ordinance would be published in summary fashion
Yeah,
as opposed in its entirety.
I did summary, yeah, because yeah, I could show
Okay.
it to you.
Could you just amend your motion to
Yep.
include that? I don't know if it's necessary, but.
Yeah. Save us a lot of money in
Yeah,
newspapers.
absolutely.
Okay, so the amendment to the motion is,
That the ordinance be published in summary form.
so the motion is amended to include that the ordinance will be published in summary form.
I'm agreeable to that.
That's fine.
Might save us some money.
Yeah.
It absolutely will.
Yep.
And then the only other
Excellent.
comment, I mean, we heard it at the public comment, we should put it prominently, on the town website, just so people can
Oh,
see it
sure.
on the front.
Mhm.
This is a new ordinance, and we've worked out with the new town clerk, the process of publishing these in E-code or whatever,
Yeah,
so that we can get these
yeah.
into the, okay, thank you. Okay,
All those in favor of adopting the ordinance, say aye.
aye.
Ordinance passes. Okay, thank you. So next, under new business, we have, discussion and possible action on proposed amended, building use policy. Director Rowland
Oh, yeah, come on up.
present this. Director of Public Works.
You all have copies, the highlighted copies.
I have some.
I believe we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess we do,
It's on the back,
Yep.
one with the yellow,
I don't know.
I'll show it,
I got it, yep, we do.
it's on the back, yeah. Go ahead.
Good evening. We're, requesting the board approve these changes that we'd like to make to the building use policy. This was last updated in June 11th of 2015. The changes are as follows. The first one is just really grammatical in, taking out the P.O. box from the town's main, address because we no longer have a P.O. box. All buildings have their own, mail delivery now. Going down under Town Hall, the change would be, no changes to Town Hall, excuse me. Next is Piedmont Hall, there would be no changes to Piedmont Hall. The next facility is Kibbe Fuller. That facility is no longer available for most community groups or any community groups because we have converted it to the social services as well as rec and leisure services offices. So those spaces are now office spaces, so they don't have any room for outside groups. So we'd like to remove, the availability of that building to outside groups. And that would be exclusive use of Summers Rec and Leisure Services as well as Summers, Social Services for their programming in their offices. Next facility down is
Just a quick question on that, does that include the gym, so the gym would not be available for?
Correct, because the gym is utilized by both of those offices,
Okay.
both of those departments for their own programming continually.
Great.
So to
Thank
try to host anybody
Okay.
is very challenging. Next facility is the Kibbe Fuller gazebo, or also known as the Green, the pavilion on the Green. And that's just a change that, it's now the Summers Recreation and Leisure Services, and Summers Social Services, that would be priority 1. And then priority 2 is all, board and commissions, within the town. And then priority 3 is town civic groups, that wasn't spelled out in the last revision. And we already have town civic groups using it, so we just wanted to clarify that. The next, building would be the senior center. Priority 1, again, would be Summers Rec and Leisure Services as well as social services. Priority 2 would be the agent for the elderly, the Summers Elderly Advisory, Summers Senior Sponsored Programs. Priority 3 would be the senior club and town civic groups, and any others agreed to by the Board of Selectmen or their appointed representatives. That really just is adding the availability of the senior center, and now that's under Rec and Leisure. They can manage that, and actually we can open that space up for night use and weekend use, which is not used that way now.
Right.
Which will alleviate some of the problems with not having the space at Kibbe. Next one down is the firehouse meeting room, there's no changes there. Next one is the Summers Historical Museum, no changes there, that's really their exclusive use with all of their paraphernalia in that building. And finally, it would be to add the Iapel property, which was not on this, last building use policy, because we had just purchased it at that time. Priority 1 for there would be the Summers Recreation and Leisure Services and Summers Social Services. Priority 2 would be Summers Recreational Sponsored Programming. Priority 3 would be town civic groups, and then priority 4 would be any other groups agreed to by the, Board of Selectmen or their appointed representatives. As we move down, there's some really just cleaning up verbiage, which is, the following rules apply for, building rentals. Town Hall, Piedmont, and the senior center would be, you'd be able to get the keys for them. Groups have to come in, schedule it, get a key, from the town clerk for Town Hall and Piedmont, and then for the other facilities would be from Rec and Leisure Services, and it'd just be between 8 a.m. and 10 p.m., Monday through Thursday. If you go down to Article 3, we'd like to add a prohibition for marijuana on all town property, as we have with alcohol at this time, and just add all town property to that verbiage. Article 7 is just cleaning up the hours again, like I said, that people can get keys to open up the buildings. And then moving down to the rental rates, Town Hall, no changes, $125 for the first 4 hours, and $25 for each additional hour. The fee for the Town Hall meeting conference room is $50 for the first 4 hours and $25 each additional hour. And that is all done through the town clerk. Piedmont Hall is the same thing. We're eliminating Kibbe Fuller because it will not be available for any outside groups from the fee schedule. Kibbe Fuller gazebo or the green, no changes there. Just to contact Rec and Leisure Services for reservations as opposed to used to just be recreation. We've added the senior center, which would be the same fee schedule as the other buildings, $125 for the first 4 hours and $25 an hour for each additional hour, and that would be all scheduled through the Rec and Leisure Services Department. And then we've added IAPO just so that it's clear. Under the terms of the deed restriction at Camp IAPO, we can't charge for that because we use grant money from DEEP from their open use fund to purchase that property. So it just spells out that we can't charge for that and that any activity that goes on there has to meet the warrants of those deed restrictions, which is really passive recreation. You can fish, you can camp, you can put out a blanket, have a picnic, you can even have semi-organized meetings, let's say, but you can't have organized games, you can't have no motorized vehicles, no motorized boats, anything
No
like
band
that.
concerts.
No concerts, unless it's somebody with a guitar, perhaps. No organized concerts, there's no electricity.
One of the concerns that I had, 'cause I cleaned up that area a couple years ago, 'cause I'm part of the Rotary Club.
Yep.
And, I don't think I ever picked up that many nippy bottles
Oh, those, yeah.
in my entire life.
That's not just there, that's everywhere.
And it's just, I was stunned. I think we had probably almost an entire trash bag just with nippies.
Oh, yeah.
And,
Walk any road, it's the same thing.
yeah, and then I'm also was
Terrible.
deeply disturbed that people were throwing away, things like, sinks that they'd taken out, tires and a whole bunch of other stuff. I mean, I don't know what we can do is there any,
We have signage up,
Yeah.
the police patrol as much as they can.
Yeah,
As soon as you see a police car, though, everybody behaves.
yeah.
We
Well,
have problems with dogs running around.
I mean, I don't have any complete, 'cause I don't sit up there 24 hours a day, but I have a sneaky suspicion it's people from Massachusetts.
The deed restrictions are such that it is open for everyone. We cannot,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
cannot dictate who goes there.
Yeah,
Yeah. No, we have neighbors that live up there and they, unofficially patrol the area and they'll
Yeah.
call, with concerns and they call the police with concerns and we do the best we can, but it's a forested area that's pretty remote and it's
Oh, yeah.
heavily utilized in the summer in particular.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
We just have two minor corrections, grammatical. Number one, we updated Summers Recreation and Leisure Services. We should also update Summer Social Services to say Summer Social and Youth Services.
Oh, okay.
So I would just make that correction throughout the
Throughout,
document.
yep.
And then number two, on page 4, bullet 3, it just says alcoholic and marijuana are prohibited. It just should say alcohol and marijuana. It probably said alcoholic beverages before we changed it, but
okay.
we'll just make it
Yep.
alcohol.
Good catch.
So those are my only two corrections. Todd, could you send us the deed restrictions for IAPO? I have not
Sure.
seen those.
Yep.
I know we've had a lot of discussions about that use, so it'd just be interesting background knowledge. And then if we had, and I know we discussed it just a few weeks ago, if we had any progress separately on the ordinance for use of town facilities, I know we had talked to the police department as well about drafting a
Kim is drafting that.
She is, perfect. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great, thank you.
Make a motion that we adopt the revisions as amended to the Town of Summers building use policy.
Second.
Any further discussion?
The only other discussion I would have is that we should make sure these policies are clearly posted. So I mean, we have a couple policies now with the Board of Selectmen, including this one, and I don't think that they're easy to find on the website or for people to find. So we should have just a section on the page that just lists all the policies,
Yeah.
including this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We
So,
could do
other than that, I think, nice job, Todd, thank you.
And it would be kinda nice, 'cause I know they have some bulletin boards up
Sure.
at IFO, if they could stick one inside there, I'm not saying people would pay attention to it, but is there any
Signage, you mean?
Yeah, they have the signage there, is there anything?
Or maybe we could do a sign just with, go to the website, we can even do a
Yeah.
QR code.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, all right, yeah.
So it would be, it'd be difficult to
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
put
we
the
just-
thing somewhere.
Yeah.
We could do another sign
Not the
inside
whole
of the
thing, but I was
bulletin
just,
board.
yeah.
Maureen can do, just do the QR codes.
Just real, can we add vaping, I think we have signs up right at the park.
Oh, yeah, there's signs everywhere.
That'd be a good idea.
I'm okay with amending the motion to include vaping
Yeah.
on page 4.
Thank
Yeah.
you. And then, just curious about the basement, that activity, this isn't gonna affect those folks, right? They're still
No.
gonna have their sports stuff done in?
Correct.
Okay.
That was never spoken to in the policy, and honestly, I didn't even think about it. The Summers affiliated athletic groups, Summers soccer, Summers baseball, Summers lacrosse, Summers ponytail, utilize the basement for storing their equipment off-season for the most part. And the basement, we call it the dungeon, because it is. It's 7
I went to
foot
school
beyond.
there, I know. I went to school there.
So, we're gonna add vaping.
So any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is the SIP, or Capital Improvement Program, discussion, possible action on SIP requests. The number one request is from the Water Pollution Control Authority, dealing with the Scannick River Water Pollution Control Abatement Program. I'd like to speak to that, please.
Thank you, Steve Getman, I'm chairman of the WPCA. We put a SIP in for almost $1 million to provide for chlorination, dechlorination at the Summersville treatment plant, deal with the issues we've been having. In the words of General Norman Schwarzkopf, you hit him with shock and awe first. Right now, $1 million, given the environment of high gas prices and product supply, might be low. We'll have to see what eventually comes down the road. But in our exploration of what is going on down at the sewage treatment plant, thanks to the report from Weston and Sampson, which I think everyone has, Weston and Sampson discovered there was an issue with the sand beds themselves. So the sand beds basically have to be totally redone. To that point, we are talking again with Weston and Sampson, coming into a new agreement with them. And in the Weston and Sampson report on page 6, it shows estimated costs. There's O&M improvements up to $150,000. Short-term capital projects for $445,000, and long-term capital projects for $500,000. Now, since the American Rescue Plan specifically mentions sewer, water, and broadband infrastructure repairs, we thought this would be something we could get some help with. The users will be paying for the O&M improvements for $150,000. But the short-term capital projects, we're gonna need some help on.
I just wanna, first of all, make sure I understand your request. You're requesting that the American Rescue Plan Act monies the town has be tapped by this be presented after, or approved, first by the Board of Selectmen, or considered, and then presented to the CIP, program for purposes of using those ARPA funds, and not just a CIP project. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
So if I could, I made a quick. So we're gonna be taking care of these things. We're gonna need some help on these capital improvements.
That's part of your presentation.
That's part of the presentation too, but as I was preparing for this meeting, I came across that, and I thought that might be a little more helpful.
So the first item, you're covering yourself
That's
with
correct.
$150,000.
That's correct, we'll be covering that. And we have already covered, the initial report from Weston and Sampson. We'll be covering that.
This is very
Okay,
helpful.
that's good.
Yeah, that's a very good report. We have to submit that by the end of the month to Pete, thanks to Carl, getting us some information and helping us get the agreement.
Yeah, I noticed, by the way, this cover picture by Weston and Sampson, it looks like a gold-plated storm drain. I mean, is that what we're asking for here, gold-plated, materials? Yeah.
No, I'd just be happy to solve the problem and move on.
$950,000, okay. Go ahead.
So basically that's about it. We're gonna need some help with that. And as we are trying to figure out how we're gonna get through this, I'm looking forward to working with the Board of Selectmen and with Mike and Brian and Carl, and trying to figure out how we're gonna get through this, because we have some timelines we have to meet.
Okay, I think there needs to be some substantial discussion here and understanding, because I think when we first heard about this project, it was in the range of $300,000 to fix the problem. This is when we first heard about it, 2 or 3 months ago?
Right,
And, things have changed since then.
absolutely.
Could
Things
you
have
tell us how it's changed? You've been talking to the DEEP as well. I mean, from what I understand, you originally had a dechlorination, so you had a chlorinated system.
That's correct.
And then DEP stepped in a couple of years ago and asked you to change it to a UV system.
UV system went in with the system when, Somersville was expanded in 2008.
Okay?
And then we stopped.
But that was because the department asked you to do that, is that correct?
We had no choice. They would not allow chlorine to go.
Right, so they demanded it.
They demanded it. And then once, Steve Jacobs found that there was an issue with the sand beds, which were basically being underutilized because the Somersville mill never took place, he thought that adding chlorination to UV would solve the problem. The report from Weston and Sampson points out, because they brought some of their experts in on small sewer systems, the issue is in the sand beds deep, and if that's not fixed, nothing is going to solve the problem. There's gonna be no way to provide disinfection. So we have to redo the sand beds, and that's what's driving the cost up. As you can see in section number 2, the short-term projects, short-term capital projects, we are cautiously optimistic on the WPCA, that should we solve the problem with the sand beds and get disinfection from the UV,
That was my question.
we
Yeah.
may be able to convince DEEP we don't need to build a dechlorination system.
So that
But
was
that
my,
sounds-
that was my
Yeah.
question to
Yeah.
you, Steve. And I just wanna preface, my remarks by, I don't think there's another board in town that has as much, social or responsibility as the WPCA. It's very important in terms of water quality, in this town. And I wanna say that ARPA does say that this kind of a project is eligible. It doesn't say that we're mandated to do anything with those ARPA funds. I mean, there are other things that are competing for it also, so and you understand that, I know. The one thing I read in this report, it seems to me that they're suggesting or recommending a phased-in approach. That means do the O&M, do the chart that you gave Tim, do the first piece of it first, see what happens.
That's what's going on.
If that works, then we might not have to do other things, but now you're saying that something would.
Phase 2 has to go through, the sand beds must
Okay,
be.
I didn't get that as I read this, and,
Yeah,
but
that's
it's okay.
trying to,
Um,
it's a lot of technical stuff, there's no question. It took me several times reading through it to figure out what's going on. I've been on WPC for a
And
while.
so then if that didn't work, then you would go into short term. And again, I didn't really study your schedule, it's a pretty detailed project schedule.
Well, the short term is the sand beds, is
Is
it
the
not?
sand
It's the
Yeah.
sand bed.
That's correct.
That's right.
So if that works, then long term would never have to happen.
As long as we could convince DEEP that, okay, UV's working, so why should we build this thing? They may be very happy to see UV working.
So what's the schedule that the DEEP is requiring here that, is so demanding that we need to avoid getting fined? I'm just curious, I asked Carl Andolino to be here, cause I know our town attorney's
Carl,
been
yeah.
intimately
Carl
involved with
was-
these
yeah, Carl was
discussions
very
with the
intimately
department,
with the last board
the
of,
regulators.
WPCA board and with the last board of selectmen, so, Carl, thank you.
Good evening, for the record, Carl Andolina. So I distributed to Mike and you three gentlemen, this is the actual permit that was issued by DEEP a few months ago. It dates back to 2020, that's when the prior permit expired. The WPCA had been working with DEEP for about 4 years on the language in this new permit. So what I placed on the top of the document is the revised section 9, where all the, sort of the meat is in terms of the obligations of the WPCA going forward. So the next 20 pages or so are the rest of the terms and conditions. There's a lot of technical stuff in there. And you'll probably come across a section 9 in this, but the section 9 in this permit has been supplanted or replaced with this. So the first obligation under this agreement, and this agreement came to fruition, as I said, after 4 years of, I can't really call it negotiation, there really was no negotiation for 3.5 or almost 3 years of that period. And the WPCA demanded a hearing in front of adjudications at DEEP, claiming that the terms of the permit could not be satisfied in its current language. So the adjudications department at DEEP asked us if we could mediate this matter rather than going directly to a hearing. So we engaged the services of Attorney Janet Brooks, former member of the Attorney General's office, who was loaned out for 22 years to Department of Environmental Protection, and she sort of, at least I sort of bring her with me in my bag of tricks wherever I have something environmental. She literally wrote the book on the Connecticut environmental law.
She has a very solid reputation,
Yeah.
and she's highly respected by everyone.
So we were, after hours and hours of negotiations and using the actual head of adjudications, attorney, I forget her name now, but anyway, she was our mediator, and we came up with these 2 pages, which are on the top. Basically, the first step would be, and this has been already completed with the Weston and Sampson report that you have in front of you, was to produce a report containing certain items that DEEP wanted to review. And that report, which is done, has to be submitted to DEEP by April 1st, 2022. All right?
So that's the report that's already written?
Correct. Just got done in its final fashion, the final form. This is just a preliminary report on what they discovered may be the causes of the problem, a sort of summary fashion, how the problems can be fixed using different techniques, and other things that are required under the DEEP regulations. So that report will go out. DEEP will take it under advisement and review it. They do not guarantee how long it will take for that process. Matter of fact, just before the process of ending our mediation with DEEP, we discovered a policy that was sent out back 6 months prior that they did not let us know about, that basically said, if people ask you how long it's going to take to do something, you can't guarantee anything in less than 6 months. May take a shorter period, may not. So we send them a report, they respond. Within 120 days of their response to us, we then, or the WPC, had to design a system, a fix. All right? We send that to them. They approve the final plans. 6 months, a year, I don't know how long it's going to take. Once they design and they approve of our final designs, we then have 365 days from the date of that approval to initiate and complete whatever the design fix is going to be. Now, that doesn't stop anyone from, while DEEP is looking at, let's say, the 6-month period to review the report that's due next week or 2 weeks from now, to maybe that WPCA could get permission of DEEP to go forward, at least do, that part.
Step 1.
Step 1, right. So, and I think, Tim, you asked a great question, is we started at 300,000, okay, now they're at a higher number. The $300,000 was an estimate at that time to do the chlorination system. The WPCA had proposed going back to chlorination because they knew it worked. They didn't like the UV system. It was forced on them. And the plan was to try to get DEEP to agree to allow us to use the chlorine as a disinfectant without dechlorinizing the water before it went into the Scannick River. And they refused to allow us to do that. So in addition to building back into the system the chlorination process, now we have to build back in, if we go to that phase, a dechlorination process. Perhaps, as Steve said, maybe just changing the sand in the filter beds to allow the UV system to work the way it's supposed to. And then, I'm sure, my guess is, after dealing with Pete 4 years on this, that they would be fine with us not doing the last phase, because they said, we don't like the chlorination process anyway. We're trying to get everyone to do the UV. If you can get the UV system to work by changing the sand filter beds, fantastic. But until, that point comes along in the process, who knows what's gonna happen. So I would guess, from start to finish, this is probably a 2.5 to 3 year project.
Wow.
Including those periods when deep is whatever they're doing while they're reviewing.
So the difficulty is that the board doesn't really understand what the immediate needs are or what the ultimate needs are, because it all depends on DEP's review of the final design,
Right.
and then allowing, short-term project to be built and operational,
Right.
and then see what kind of results you get from that.
Well, obviously, until they respond to at least this initial report from Weston and Sampson, there are a lot of unknowns, there's no question about that. But when I read the report, it's pretty clear to me, and I think it, as you go through it, you'll see as well, no matter what happens, whether they go to chlorine or try to, continue using the UV system, the sand filter beds need to be replaced. That's the finding, I would say, that's the major finding by Weston and Sampson in this report. Doesn't matter, you could have the best disinfection system in the world out there at the plant, it's not gonna work because of the sand filter beds, which have degraded over time, and it seems to me the conclusion or the cause of that was it was built to expect certain flows. Those flows never occur. So when you have slowdown in flows, they settle quicker than they normally would, and that's what happened. I guess whatever that process was, and it's better described there, took place because when the system was redesigned in '08, it included 100 units over at the mill, and then there were another, so that was gonna take up, let's say, 20 or 25% of capacity, and the other 25% of the increased capacity was gonna go to any other projects in Summers Village, what do they call that?
Yeah, you're opening Pandora's box on
Yeah.
this.
Yeah, the problem is,
Because, I'll tell you, so, let's say you.
I'm not advocating for a position. I'm just giving-
I'm
yeah.
just gonna
Yeah.
hypothetical, and then the board's behind you, so they can.
Yeah, I'll sit down.
So let's say you redesign this thing for the lesser flow. Now are you handicapping the possibility
No,
of
we're not
any?
we're not gonna do it to a lesser flow. We have to maintain the same permit regulations. It will be capable of taking up to our permit
Okay,
limit.
so let's say that the mill project we have proposed does not go through, but in its place, some other developer comes along in Somersville and wants to do condos or whatever.
Right.
That would be a possibility then. It wouldn't be discounted or because you redesigned a sewer plant not to be able to handle that.
so it doesn't constrict the additional
Right.
usage
Correct.
down the road.
Like Carl pointed
Okay,
out, it was
okay.
initially meant to take on the mill, which is 102 units plus whatever else, and still leave room for improvement, because I know Jeff Lipton has an area that he's thinking about, be doing some things, and who knows what other development could happen in Somersville. But we plan to redo the beds, and then maybe not use all of them at once, just use a couple of them as we need them, and then go from there. But because of the mass that's grown in there, the sand has to be taken out, the gravel underneath it, new piping has to be put in, and that stuff gets taken care of going through fresh sand and fresh filter material, and a change in the operation, because we're gonna be changing how the maintenance schedule is going on and how we process everything. We should be able to meet with the UV system, the disinfection that we're supposed to do. Once we get there, then we can have a discussion about getting rid of phase 3, but we have to get there first.
So how long will that take, do you think?
Well, we have to get the contract written up, we have to have Weston and Sampson design something, and then of course it has to go out to bid. We have to, vet contractors, whatever else, and then see when they can start doing it. I'm hoping, cautiously optimistic, we might be able to have a shovel in the ground sometime this fall. And if we can get it in the ground this fall, it might be operational for next year's disinfection season. And then we can prove to Deep that, okay, this works because we fixed the problem here. But we're already already moving forward with going towards this, sand bed replacement.
So the concern about this regulatory hammer that might come down and potentially fine the town is really premature right now, isn't it? I mean, it's because Deep itself can't get done the work, they can't get the review done within, 6 months of time or whatever,
And it might
and
get
then you've
worse
got another
because
6
of
or
people
12 months to build out the system.
Right, exactly, because Deep is going through retirements and whatever else, and we're having other issues. So it might buy us some extra time to get this thing fixed and show them that we don't have to go to this chlorination, dechlorination issue. The WPCA may very well have to pay for a design so that in case it doesn't work, yeah, all right, then we have to build it, but we're hoping the sand beds will do it.
All right, I'm familiar with Deep and their regulatory process, and it seems to me, number one, that the potential $25,000 a day fine is something that, number one, they've never, ever used against a town. And because of the process that we're going through, it doesn't seem to be some sort of imminent anvil that's hanging over the town's head. Is that correct?
Well, I don't think it's imminent, but it's still out there.
Yeah, I
It's
understand
possible.
that, but I mean,
Yeah.
it seems they've been reasonable in your recent discussions with them, and you've been reasonable in talking to them, so everybody wants to get the problem solved, and
Right.
as
Well,
long
like Carl pointed out, we went to Deep and asked them if we could go back to chlorine with a system that would meet federal standards for discharge into waterways. They said, absolutely not.
because there's a term for that, no backsliding.
But there's no
Yeah,
rule on
backsliding.
Deep about backsliding.
Right,
And despite the fact that.
it's a regulatory euphemism.
But there's no requirement that they approve your permit, so that's
That's
the,
correct, but
yeah,
Enfield.
that's where they have the power.
Enfield uses chlorine and does not dechlorinate. And
But they
dumps that
always
in.
have though. And we previously did, under our previous permit.
Right.
But once we changed our permit,
Mhm.
we now can't backslide.
Right,
Right,
Yeah.
that's what they're saying.
Yeah.
but is backsliding a real policy, is, who
Well,
knows? There may
that's
be-
up to them and not up to us,
Exactly,
unfortunately.
yeah, right. But again, they say they go to federal standards and they want to go with federal standards, but when we show them that we'll meet the federal standards, they say, no.
So if I could interrupt.
Go ahead.
Carly and myself, I can appreciate you guys getting information and having this discussion. We've had this discussion with Deep for 3 years. Right now, I think these 2 pages spell out what we need to do, right? So that's pretty much it. Now, that doesn't mean in the future that we can't get more time to do something, but right now, these are the terms and conditions of our agreement with Deep. So, we've completed phase 1, the WPCA, they're gonna have that report required, and as soon as, they review that, they can get Weston and Sampson in designing doing a design. Now, I expect during this review process, because this report indicates items that weren't discussed initially, we didn't know about the sand filter beds, it wasn't brought up. So there's gonna be a lot of back and forth between Deep Engineers and Weston and Sampson, and then together they'll work out what is the next phase. It may be different than the phase that was anticipated a year ago, just putting the chlorination system in.
Okay, I think that there are a lot of other issues here with regards to what kind of contribution should the current users of this facility be tagged with.
I think the whole funding scenario is up in the air,
Yeah,
Yeah.
because there are a whole bunch of different options, other than just applying for ARPA funds. I mean, would this qualify under the Clean Water Act, as a project?
yeah, good question, I had the same
Yeah,
question.
there's a lot of
Yeah.
other grants.
Clean Water
We're
Act.
just getting this together now, and we
Okay.
need to start exploring ARPA or any other funds that
Okay.
may or may not be
Well,
available.
then my answer, and I'm not a selectman, I'm just a
Yeah.
CFO here, would be it's too preliminary
Premature.
to commit
Yeah.
ARPA funds to this because they actually have a timetable associated with them in terms of when you can appropriate and when you have to spend. And depending on any regulatory, obstacles you may encounter, that you may end up never even using those ARPA funds. So I would suggest that you gotta go down the path with as Carl's pointing out, just a little bit farther and more clearly define what steps need to be taken. I think you're doing the right thing by using your fund for the immediate steps. There's a whole bunch of different options, from short-term loans, long-term loans, bonding, short-term notes, loans to town, to the WPCA, payback, assess users. I mean, so, and no one's in a position to even determine what that approach should be at this point, so.
Yeah, no, I would just say, I mean, number one, thank you. I mean, I appreciate your leadership on this board. I know your volunteers. I mean, you have a big lift here. I think you've made a lot of progress. I think the communication has improved significantly between the WPCA and the board, so we're very appreciative of that. I think you've done some great work and engaged some great people. You're doing the right things. I agree with the CFO. I mean, I think that we need to seriously explore the user charge. You know, how many houses connect to this? Or how many connections do you have?
300.
300 some odd.
300, so I mean, when you do the math out, I mean, for $500,000, you're talking like $1,600 per household. You know, we know now we can start to collect the money, we need it. I mean, you could assess $100 a month and have the money available when you're ready to do this in a year. You know, so I mean, I think things like that should be explored. Maybe you hold a public hearing with your users, you know, to look at some of that with the funding.
You have to, they have an ordinance that says you have to.
So I mean, maybe, you know, right, I don't wanna see us go straight to ARPA because it's like the path of least resistance. I think user funds, I mean, we have a lot more than 300 households in town, and almost nobody else connects to the system. I mean, it seems the users have had a very, very discounted service for all these years. I mean, we have an extremely low water and sewer rate for people that connect to that.
Correct.
You know, and I think it's only fair that they pay a significant portion of this. And again, if there's hardships and things, you know, we can have a hardship application process. I mean, there can be things built in for people that don't have the ability to pay, but I think most of your users do have the ability to pay.
Well, again, depending upon the users, I mean,
Yeah.
Summers Village is one thing. If you look at the rest of Summersville, there might be some other.
Well, that's where we can look at hardships and things, but I mean, I think those things need to be explored. You have some time to raise some money now, and like Mike mentioned, you have notes and things like that from the town. I mean, we have a lot of financing options.
Right.
But I mean, $1,600 to raise over 2 years from each resident, you know, is pretty reasonable.
Okay, thank you.
So,
Yeah, well, I look forward to working with Mike, Brian,
Yeah.
Carl, and.
Well, I think we've got a lot of additional work that needs to be
Yeah.
done
Oh,
here.
absolutely.
And we're gonna continue these discussions, and
Yeah, no,
thank you very much for your presentation
Yeah,
tonight.
you're welcome.
No, you've shown, you've
been
done
very
great
helpful.
work. Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great. Our next, item on the agenda is the, Social and Youth Services, Mental Health Services request for SIP Capital Improvement Program, ARPA funding. Thank you.
Good evening. Allison Maynard, Director of Social and Youth Services. So before you, you have a funding proposal to increase the mental health services available to youth in our community. I'm proposing 3 different additional jobs. One is existing and is funded 12 hours a week by the Department of Children and Families. We have not hired for that position yet, but that's my intention, is late spring. So I'm proposing that 8 additional hours are added with ARPA funding to fund that position. I'm also proposing a 10-hour-a-week clinician who would be either a contracted individual or we would partner with an organization to offer mental health counseling to youth and group counseling. And then the third position would actually be, this is a kind of a unique model, but it's existing in a lot of towns now across really the country, but it would be to have a camp social worker. So this would be a temporary contracted position again, who would work at the camp, offering social emotional support to our campers. The total request is $65,896 annually, and I did provide the 3-year total of $197,688.
Great. I had a question, that relates to how you mentioned that we have some DCF funds. Does that apply to this too?
So the youth services coordinator position is already funded at 12, well, I proposed that for next fiscal year to fund, that position. It's a brand new position, we don't have anybody in it. But 12 hours a week would be, funded through the DCF grant. And then this would complement that position with an additional 8 hours, bringing it up to really what I need, which is a regular part-time position. 12 hours just isn't sufficient, to develop, implement, identify youth programming.
So these funds you're requesting would be used to fund 3 separate individuals, is that right?
Correct.
And you're splitting the cost of the grant cost on the one position? Is that what you plan?
So the one position, the youth services coordinator,
Yeah.
would be funded 8 hours with ARPA, I'm
Okay.
proposing 8 hours with ARPA, 12 hours with DCF funding.
Okay.
Would there be a billing model for the 10-hour contracted person? I mean, will we backbill that?
So I guess it depends. I think the easiest path, honestly, with that position, and clinicians are extremely high demand, right now, would be to partner with an agency, and set up some sort of contract with, whether it be CHR, or, I know Vernon did a model with Hockenham Valley Community
We have
Council.
one with the village as well.
Yeah, the village, there's many providers out there who already have clinicians on staff that we could contract with to offer.
But they would then bill for people that have the ability to pay.
Oh, with their health insurance?
Yes.
Yes, we could we could absolutely do that
I think we
model.
should explore that, especially for the 10 hours. So I mean, I would be in favor of this as a not to exceed number, but I think that, we should look at, like, especially for the 10-hour person, using billing revenue because most people would have the ability to pay, through health insurance, because it's mandated.
So that does get tricky though, because I know we looked at that when I was up in Stafford, and how we could possibly implement that here in Summers. And my understanding is that DPH would have to approve it as a clinic site. So I'm not sure, we would have to, if we worked with a nonprofit agency that was already, then they would have their billing structures in place.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's the only way that would work. If it's a private clinician, I'm not sure how that would work, but we can explore that, absolutely.
So one other question I have relates to, I believe you stated previously to this, that there is a potential of $125,000 a year grant
Correct.
from the federal government, correct?
Correct.
Every year for 5 years.
Yeah.
If you have this program put in place.
So that is the Drug-Free Communities Grant, yes, and that would actually give us another staff person who would be a prevention coordinator, who would work with substance abuse.
So this is a separate position, separate from that grant. So that grant doesn't in any way
No, we'll hear about,
complement.
No, I mean, it's just
Support
additional
this.
support. Certainly, they would probably work very much in tandem with our youth services coordinator, but it would be completely separate. Down the road, could the youth services coordinator position be full-time and some of that DFC funding could complement it? Absolutely. But we won't hear about that until August.
So you'll use the ARPA money, for 3 years?
That's the proposal.
And then, in year number 4, then that's it, no more services? Or do you hopefully by that point have developed some other funding to continue?
Yeah, for example, so, just in my time here, I identified the Youth Services Bureau funding, and that's how we have started the whole department. The DFC funding absolutely could be a complement. So I would continue to seek out additional grant sources. And I do think, to Bill's point, there is a potential that we could bill for mental health services down the road. I mean, that's a big undertaking, but other communities like Stafford have done it, and then it's cost neutral to the town. In fact, you can bring in revenue actually doing that model.
Okay.
I'm okay with moving in there, yeah.
You're okay with voting on this? Any further questions?
I make a motion to approve the proposed request from Social and Youth Services, with an amount not to exceed $197,688 over 3 years, using American Rescue Plan funding, and to recommend it to the CIP committee for funding.
Second.
Any further discussion?
I would just make sure you emphasize it's a not to exceed amount, so there's
We heard that.
But this is one of the most urgent needs though, that I think we have in our community is mental health.
Yeah,
So I think this is
I
very
agree.
important.
thank you.
Thank you.
All right,
All those in support of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we next have on our agenda approval of minutes. We have 5 different sets of minutes we need to approve. pending for some time now.
Can we just do them all as one motion, do you think?
I could do that.
Okay.
I think we could do that, that'd be good. I've reviewed all these
I have
minutes
too, yeah.
and amended them, and, they're fine by me, so.
Look okay?
Do I have a motion?
Yeah, I'd be happy to make a motion, to approve, the minutes of February 17th, February 24th, March 3rd, and the special meeting of March 3rd, and the March 10th special meeting.
I'll second that motion.
Any further discussion? All those in support of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Minutes are approved. Thank you.
Do we have a notice for a new meeting for this hearing, or is
We do. I mean, for which year?
For 10 o'clock, this is part of
Yeah.
our meeting.
No, we have to adjourn this.
What I suggest is you make a motion to add it to this, 'cause the way I do.
Yeah, we don't have another agenda.
Yeah, I know.
No, we do
We
not
have
have
another
another
meeting,
agenda.
so we're gonna have to add it to
Add
this?
to this. That-
Oh, boy.
So,
I just realized that.
So we can't adjourn.
so we can't adjourn and then start the.
No, I think just, I can stop the meeting and put it back on.
No, I think we'll just keep running.
Okay.
Okay, so I'd like
Okay.
to make a motion to add to the agenda to tonight's meeting, public comment on, the proposed, marijuana,
Recreational marijuana.
yeah, recreation,
sale and
sale and
growth.
cultivation in the town of Summers.
Second?
All those in support of the motion, any further discussion? All those in support of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Okay. So we're gonna proceed now to the, informational meeting that has been discussed, both, it's been on the website, it's been in the newspaper, it's been discussed, it's been noticed in town for several weeks. This is a public information meeting. Start at 7 o'clock, we're only 3 minutes late. Thank you for being here tonight. To discuss retail sales and the growing of recreational cannabis. And, we're here to, basically take public comment. I thought it might be helpful to, precede any comment with comments, with a presentation by our town attorney, Carl Andolina, who will explain the process and the options available to the town. Carl.
Okay, were there any more of these? Maybe one of these guys can share one.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Keeney. For the record, Carl Andolina. So, I took the liberty of, when reviewing the statutes, the Public Act, and some information I have in a file, I took the liberty of copying some of that material and presented a handout. I only brought 30 of them, so I asked Tim, he said there'd be about 20 people here, so I figured 30, but looks like a little more, so. I thought rather than just me talking, we could just kind of breeze through these documents. There's some repetition here, but this will give you a basic understanding of what's going on with the sale and usage of cannabis in the state of Connecticut. As you know, back in effective July 1st, 2021, about 9 months ago, the legislature adopted legislation that would allow the recreational use of cannabis in the state of Connecticut. The bill itself is over 300 pages long, and there's many, many provisions that don't necessarily impact our discussion tonight. But the main ones that do are sort of condensed into this handout. So the first document, I think 2 pages, and it talks about, or actually 3, recreational cannabis. It gives some definitions because some of these words are going to be used later on. But, let's back up for a second. So generally speaking, what we're talking about is, two items that you sort of have, some control over as a municipality. One is the retail sales of cannabis in your neighborhood or your community. And two is the control over, cultivation of marijuana in your community. So every town in Connecticut, 169 towns, has the opportunity and option of either regulating the retail sale of cannabis and, regulating, what we would describe as mini cultivators or, those are small growers, micro cultivators. Those are the two things that could end up in this town should either the Board of Selectmen, agree to adopt an ordinance to do that or pass it back to the zoning commission to do that. So right now, the law provides that based upon the population, there could be so many growers and so many retail establishments in any given community. The cutoff right now is 25,000. So since the population of Summers is less than that, what we're speaking about at this point would be the possibility for one retailer in town and one micro cultivator. So that's what we're sort of talking about at this point. In 2004, the Department of Consumer Protection, which is going to regulate this and be responsible for handing out permits to retailers and cultivators, is going to take a look at the status, I guess, of marijuana retailers and cultivators in the state and make a decision as to whether the number should be increased of retailers. They might lower the number to, let's say, 2 retailers for every 20,000 or something like that. The future is unknown. No one knows what's going to happen in July of 2024. But for right now, if the town allows retailers, there would be one retailer, at least in the short term. And if it allows micro cultivators, there would be one micro cultivator. Micro cultivator, you can see, is an operation that has between 2,000 and 10,000 square feet under cultivation. All right. I assume that all of these facilities, there are some facilities already in existence that were in existence prior to the 2001 legislation, and they were growing marijuana for medical use. There's a fairly large one in Simsbury, Connecticut, and I'm sure there are others around the state. They're all indoors because of the value of the product and what it takes to grow. It's not like you can't grow this like you grow tobacco, in the Connecticut River Valley. So that's essentially what we're talking about. I want to add a third thing, though, that the town can, by ordinance, prohibit the use of cannabis products in public spaces and can prohibit the use of cannabis products in private public spaces, i.e. restaurants. Like you can't smoke in restaurants. They could adopt an ordinance and say you can't use marijuana in restaurants, so on and so forth. So it has the opportunity to do that as well. Along those lines, the state has determined, however, that if you are a municipality with a population of over 50,000 people, you must provide on public space, a public area where people can smoke marijuana on town property. So you're not in that position. If you were, you'd have to open up, I guess, I don't know, one of your parks, Camp Iapo, for use.
You can stop there.
You can stop there, yeah. The sacred Camp Iapo.
Do your nips in your pot at the same time, right?
Yeah. Maybe we'd cut down on the number of nips being thrown
Yeah,
around.
maybe,
I
yeah.
don't know. So, sort of down halfway through this first page, and again, I don't live here. I don't care what you guys do. I'm here to assist you in whatever decisions are made. But I just want to give you all the information. So the statute also provides that if you were to have a retailer in your municipality, that you would get 3% of the sales of that, from that retailer. And you would use that money for any one of those 6 items listed sort of halfway down on this page. So the money would go into your general fund perhaps, but would be earmarked for only those uses. So you couldn't use this money to, I don't know, buy another piece of property or decrease the general mill rate in town or something like that. It would have to be earmarked for those purposes, all right? So one of the sections, I said it was 300 pages long, section 148, which is in the back, we're not going to go through that, is the section that talks about what I just explained, that you can have one retailer and one micro cultivator for communities of less than 25,000 people. If you do nothing, all right, a year from now, if you do nothing by then, you will have to allow at least one retailer to open up in any business zone where any other retail use is provided for. So wherever retail uses are allowed in town, wherever they are, in the business zone, I assume, right? In your, yeah, no, I just, then you would have to allow at least one retailer to go into that zone. If you wanted a retailer in town, and then it would go back to the zoning commission to decide where it would be appropriate for this retailer to locate. Many towns are sort of pushing the retailers into industrial areas with a certain number of conditions, you know, sort of like the old package store laws where you couldn't have a package store within 1,500 feet of a church or a school. So those kinds of things, those setbacks would probably be built into the regulation. It would probably be certainly by special permit, which is the highest form of a zoning permit that the zoning commission could act on. Limitation of hours, those kinds of things are all possible if it goes back, all right? The other thing I want to tell you is that you, the community, all right, can force a referendum on this issue by getting a certain number of signatures on a petition. And then the town would have to have a referendum asking basically one question: do you approve the banning of retail sales and you know, cultivation of marijuana in the town of Summers? And the folks, the townspeople would come out and during an all-day referendum would vote on that.
Carl, I got something here from the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities, and they're saying that upon 10% of the voters signing a
That's
petition,
referendum.
Right.
then the referendum would happen.
Right.
So we need 10%?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah, that's another, it's on another page, but right, that is correct, yep.
okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Yep.
Carl,
Yeah,
can I ask you a question?
sure,
Is it allowed to ask a question?
that's what we're here for.
If a company or a person wants to grow it here as a, what do you call it, a micro cultivator?
Right,
What benefit does the town get from that operation?
just the normal taxes that would apply. I don't think that the 3% tax, no, I'm sorry, it would apply. So you get 3% of their sales.
Of their sales to a retail outlet or?
Correct, yeah,
wherever
wherever, yes.
Like wholesale sales.
Right, yeah.
Oh, okay.
So you'd still get the 3, whether it was, so there's a retailer, right? Then you have what's called the hybrid retailer, and this I don't think applies here. Those would be retailers who already currently sell under Connecticut law for medicinal purposes. I don't think you have a dispensary here, right? So that wouldn't apply. But you could have the micro cultivator who would then pay 3% of their revenues to the town to be used for those purposes as set forth in the statute. Now, you don't have to have a retailer. You could decide we don't want retail sales, but we'll allow a micro cultivator. And you could, under the zoning regulations, I suppose a major cultivator could come into town and ask just under like an industrial zone and say, instead of, you know, growing tomatoes indoors, I'm going to grow marijuana indoors. That's a totally different animal. But right now, the state of Connecticut, they have opened up their application process for retailers and micro cultivators. It was opened a few weeks ago, so they are taking applications. Before anyone can apply, they have to have a sign-off, like for liquor use, same thing, before you can apply for any liquor license in the state of Connecticut, the municipality must sign off saying this is allowed in our town. So no one would be able to process an application for these uses in the town of Summers until there was a zoning regulation in place and they went through that process first. All right, so no one has, that I'm aware of, could apply to be a retailer in the town of Summers. The other thing that the state says, now, it's possible that when these retailers especially open up, that at least initially would cause some kind of stir, you know, that there'd be people lining up for miles. I don't know what I remember the first day the casino opened up, yeah, there were people lining up for miles. I can't imagine people doing that to come to Summers, but you could get reimbursed for any expenses you had, public safety expenses up to $50,000 if you had to have, you know, your police department out there controlling traffic and so on and so forth, going into this little retailer that you might approve. So those are sort of the money parts of it.
Quick question, any idea how much a dispensary earns in a year? You're saying 3%.
I have no idea.
So I checked.
Yeah.
They make as much as a small Whole Foods. So 3% of what a Whole Foods would bring in would cover the town. Just a, you know, roundabout thing.
One thing I might add is, I got some additional information today with regards to the micro cultivator, and that there would be some zoning issues because of the need to locate micro cultivator a far distance away from residential areas because of noise. By the way, they run 24/7.
Absolutely.
Because of noise, odor, and light pollution that would be generated by this facility. That's just something to be aware of.
Carl, two questions. Did you have more, Carl, or I don't wanna cut you off?
No, you can, most of the rest of the stuff is repetitive, but yeah, sure, go ahead.
Okay, and again, only for the purpose of making sure we can explore all the options as a board and as a town. I see that you need 10% of the electors to petition for a referendum. Could the Board of Selectmen, put this on the ballot in November without receiving 10%? Could we present a referendum question another way to get a town vote on this?
I'd have to go through the charter and the regulation or the statutes again, but I think it would be if they're saying, because right now, you can get a petition demanding that you hold a referendum on any item over which the legislative body in this town has control. So, notwithstanding the cannabis issue, I mean, if someone said, we want a referendum on
a new field or something.
Anything, whatever it was, whatever, you know, and they could, you have a petition process in your charter. So it seemed to be, I mean, it would be certainly a legitimate purpose, and I think you could do that if that's the way you want it to go. You know, and we could talk about the ways of doing it. Obviously, with any referendum, you'd want to have a public hearing first. I don't know that I'd suggest waiting till November, necessarily. And the reason would be, if the vote was, yes, we want to have these, you need time for, the zoning commission, because really, it would seem to me that if you were gonna permit this, and then someone's gonna make a decision as to how, where, when, those kinds of things, it would be more appropriate for the zoning commission to do that, rather than doing it by ordinance.
Right.
And then my other question would be, could you explain to everyone at the back, it talks about prohibited, moratorium, and approved. I think prohibited and approved are pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
But what would the moratorium option entail?
All right, so attached to this, I just went, and this is a couple of weeks old, but there's somewhere halfway through, there's 4 pages, and these are the towns. Once you make a decision as to what you're gonna do in your town, you have to report to the DCP, which is the Department of Consumer Protection, what you've decided to do, all right? So this is the list so far. This is not 169 towns, it's maybe half or less than half. So this shows you what other towns are doing, all right? Obviously, as Bill said, Avon said, we're out, okay? Beacon Falls says, we're gonna have a moratorium, and you might find, for instance, East Windsor They said, okay, we're in. The moratorium, which a lot of these towns have done, is a process that goes through the zoning commission, where they say, we need time to study this, all right, and write a real regulation. It's gonna take us more time than you're giving us, so we're gonna impose a moratorium. So under the zoning commission and the planning commission can impose a moratorium, let's say, on new subdivisions, if they wanted to. They could say there's gonna be no more, solar farms in town, whatever. But the moratorium has to be, short term, typically 6 months, all right? And it has to be for a legitimate purpose. And in this case, deciding what you're gonna do in terms of writing a zoning regulation to regulate marijuana use would certainly be a legitimate purpose. So, and I've discussed this with the zoning commission, all right? And, my guess is if you threw it back to them, they would probably do a moratorium, a short-term moratorium, rather than dive right into drafting a regulation. But as I think we discussed before, you're part of the process. They wanted to see how you guys felt.
Right.
And, you're able to have a little bit more leeway in terms of bringing these type of, folks in front of you in a sort of informal way. They don't have that much leeway, so.
That's a great transition into the next part of are you pretty much done?
I am, yes, thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. So, the Board of Selectmen wanted to hold tonight's public discussion, basically to get input from those that would like to speak. Whether, again, the question is whether or not to, and this, by the way, was a survey that was put out on Summers Connect 2 weeks ago. The questions were, of course, are you a resident of Summers? Are you 18 years old? Then the meat of the questions were, do you think Summers should allow a retail establishment that sells recreational marijuana? The results were we had 702 answered that question. 337 said yes, 365 said no. So basically it's 48% said that they would like to see recreational marijuana in Summers, 52% said no. The next question was, do you think Summers should allow for a grower to cultivate recreational marijuana? Answer was, out of 700 that answered that question, 372 said yes, or 53%. 329 said no, or 47%. So as you can see, it's a pretty close response on both questions. Yes?
Are you aware that you can answer that multiple times?
I don't think you can on the same computer, at least.
It's not a scientific survey, and we are aware of that.
You can go back
Yeah.
in multiple times.
Yeah.
Not on the same computer.
So before you draw too much of an inference from.
It's one data point. I mean, like, for instance,
Yeah.
we didn't sample, so there's bias as far as who responds and things. It's just one data point. I mean, this is another data point.
Yeah.
We just want to get as broad, and obviously 700 people responded. We don't have 700 people in the room tonight, so, yeah. But thank you, yeah.
That's a good point. But again, it was a way to get some input through a survey.
Yeah.
You can't enter multiple times on the same computer. It has to be from a different computer.
Right.
Once you enter on one computer, you're locked out.
Right.
Yeah.
That's true. Not to say that I tried, but. Okay, so we're going to start with the public presentations, discussion, comments. I'm going to limit each presenter to 3 minutes, just so we aren't here all night long. So, who would like to be first? If you just give your name and your address in town would be helpful to start. Who'd like to speak first at the microphone?
Can we get timing?
Oh, I
Okay,
can,
sorry.
sorry.
Good, yeah.
Dan Thayer, 10 Colton Road. Quick and to the point, I'm opposed to both the sale and the cultivation in any way, shape, or form. There's been discussion in there about how we're going to prevent use by underage people. I spent 30 years as a cop, and we spent a lot of time every year going in and raiding liquor serving establishments and liquor stores,
catching the young kids in there. And many times, the liquor servers were happy to have us do it because someone's got an ID that says they're of a certain age, they can't argue. So, I think you're just generating problems for the town, you're generating problems for law enforcement, and any benefit that might be, realized by additional taxes, I don't think are worth we're losing in the character of the town to begin with. Thank you.
Thank you. Next. Who else would like to speak this evening? Please. Just please give your name and your address here.
Sir, Josh Benoit, 11 Old Salem Drive. I'll try and be 3 minutes. Thanks for taking the time to hear from us tonight. I have a few points of interest that I'd like to talk about. These are just a handful of the things that caught my attention while doing some research for tonight's meeting. On the subject of crime, as noted in Justice Quarterly, Volume 37 from the year 2020, a study performed in Denver, Colorado from 2012 to 2015 found that neighborhoods with one or more medical or recreational dispensaries saw increased crime rates that were between 26% and 1,452% higher than in neighborhoods without any commercial marijuana activity. I, for one, don't want to see even a 1% increase, so 1,452% out of the question.
I know somebody that lived in Colorado, they would concur with what you just said.
On the subject of public health, as we all know from the past couple of years, the CDC is the crown jewel of the medical industry. Their discernment and guidance is beyond reproach. Looking at their website for only a couple of, looking at their website for only a couple of minutes, you can quickly discover some of the negative health effects of marijuana use. It can negatively affect the brain, the heart, the lungs, and many other vital organs. Its use can lead to addiction. Its use can lead to mental health problems such as depression, social anxiety, and suicide. Its use has permanent effects on the developing brain when use begins in adolescence. And that's kind of a big deal since in 2019, 4 out of 10 high school students reported using marijuana in their lifetime. This is all just scratching the surface of the health problems caused by marijuana use. After the garbage we've put up with for the last couple of years, do we really want to pile on more health issues for our community? The last thing I'll touch on doesn't really fall into any one particular category. Maybe I'll just call it the subject of common sense. Do we really want any more mentally deficient, high people walking around our town? The new smoke shop that's right around the corner can't even keep their sign from falling apart as it is. Do we really want to see what it looks like when you throw weed into the mix? Do you want the person babysitting your kids to be high? Do you want to sit out back in your yard on a warm summer night only to smell your neighbor's stank weed drifting across your property? I already deal with that, and we don't even have a dispensary in town. So what is the argument for allowing this degeneracy in our community? We know it won't help with crime or health or even productivity. Is it about the money? A few extra bucks in taxes that the town will get? I'll leave you with this. Say your kid has a job, but they also have a car payment, a cell phone bill, car insurance, groceries, all the same bills that we pay. But say they also have some expensive hobbies and they like to go out to eat with their friends a lot. Your kid comes to you and says, Mom, Dad, I need more money. What would you say to that kid? Would you say, if you need more money, start selling drugs? No, of course not. That would be the dumbest move you could make as a responsible adult and parent. You would tell them to put in more hours at work and cut back on the frivolous spending, which is what I would encourage the town to do as well. So, why are we trying to fool ourselves into thinking that selling and growing drugs in our community is any better just because it might bring in a few extra dollars? In the interest of public health, safety, and good old-fashioned common sense, I urge you to ban not only the retail sale and growing of recreational marijuana, but also the use of marijuana in our town.
Thank you, Mr. Benoit. Appreciate it. Someone else like to offer some comments? Mr. Krasinski.
Steve Krasinski, 55 Wells Road. This proposal does nothing for the town. You're gonna get 3%, which is nothing. It's a gateway drug. I don't even know why it was passed. We don't want it in Summers. I see no benefit for the town of Summers. If you can show me some benefits, I could probably think about it, but there are no benefits. So let's pass a message to our children in town. We don't approve it. We don't want you using it. The only way we can stop it is for you guys to stand up and say no. And that's what I'm asking you to do now, say no.
Does that
Thank you.
include cultivation, you're saying no to?
Include cultivation, yes,
Very good.
yes, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir, in the back row.
Herman Mayette, 11 Hall Hill Road. I have a question. How much money is set up in the budget right now to take care of the items in number 1 through 6?
1 through 6, meaning,
The 3% revenue you've received that would be spent on these services?
I mean, the areas that it would be used for?
Yes.
Yeah.
How much money is in the budget that's being spent on those items right now?
there's no figures we have.
We'd have to have that broken down, I mean, we'd have to ask, you know, the finance department, you know,
Right.
to give us some of that number.
Well, just doing a quick summary of the room. I'm sure there's a few people here who know what a nickel bag is and a dime bag is. They're a product of the 60s. And nobody's really distinguished the difference between recreational and medical, unless you've gotten involved in a situation where you need it for medical. Then your changes, thoughts on recreational become completely different. Seems like every town that gets involved in a situation like this, I don't want it in my backyard, but you have no problem driving 10 miles to go and purchase it. Sometimes there are things that we have to make life changes for. Sometimes they're for the better, sometimes they're not. Unfortunately, there's a lot of things involved in this that most people get on the bandwagon and take a negative attitude about it without looking at some of the positive possibilities to it. 3% isn't a lot of money, but it's not only 3% on the retail, it's 3% on the grower. That's 6%.
If it's grown in town.
If it's
Yeah.
grown in town. This isn't your grandfather's pot. This is cultivated, it's controlled. I think it's something that needs to be a little bit more consideration and thought given to it. And it's not just because of the 3%. Again, it goes back to, if you have a new bar, you're gonna bring in prostitution, you're gonna bring in crime. You've already shot a negative, you shot yourself in the foot before you even gone in it, but again, you have no problem going in and spending a couple $100 for dinner and maybe a couple of drinks in the place that you had such a negative impact on. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to, offer some comments tonight? Yes, ma'am.
Catherine Mashak, 54 Springfield Road. This is interesting because I have felt that cannabis has some good medical benefits for some people. It works very well. And like anything else, people abuse it. I don't think this town needs a distribution center because you're going to get people from out of town coming in. And I've been by the place, I was looking for something else up in Northampton. They have, police there all the time when they're open, and we can't really support that in this town. It's expensive. However, this is a farm community. Most people have forgotten that. They wanna grow it, especially hydroponically, so that it is organic. Anything cannabis is a plant that brings the toxins out of the soil. So any of the ground which is a lot of it, is grown potatoes and tobacco in this town. It's not gonna really be organic, even if the fields have been fallow for 10 years. There's still toxins in the soil. So if they want to put up some structures and grow it, and it's organic, I carry some CBD products that have a 0.3%, less than a 0.3% THC level in them. And people are using them, and there's benefit. People with anxiety disorders, it can help. But I think we need to be very judicious about what we allow and really research and look at what's going on in other towns. We don't have the police force to really monitor things perhaps and keep a handle on things. And are we going to require that they have security people if we do this? And they're all over, everywhere. They're opening up against in Enfield, Rockville, Springfield. I don't know as this town can really even support a business that, a distribution center. That's my feeling.
So what are your thoughts on the cultivation?
Well, I think if it's done properly, I think there's still a lot of farmland available. They grow in a greenhouse, grow it hydroponically, grow it organically. There's use for that. Anything they're growing on the old tobacco land saying it's organic in Windsor, forget about it. It's not going to be for a few years. It literally takes the toxins out of the soil. And cannabis has been used for thousands of years medicinally. It's like anything can be abused, if it's not used properly. So that's my feelings about it. I think that it's something that we need to venture into carefully and gradually and really probably look at what's going on in some other towns, and some of the problems they're dealing with as a result.
Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Anyone else have some comments they'd like to make? Joe.
Joan Forley, 46 Skyridge Drive, and I'm talking to a hostile crowd, but that's okay, because I totally support the cultivation and sale of marijuana in town. So maybe I speak to the other 50% of your survey.
John, we can't hear you back here.
Yes.
Do I have to start again?
There you go. Yeah, start it.
I said I totally support the cultivation and sale of marijuana in Summers. This is a legal issue now. That's not up for debate. We have nothing to gain by prohibiting it. Like it's been said before, people will just go a few miles out of town to get it. It's not going to be big. It's going to be one store, one farm. We're not going to need police. Northampton has a huge facility. Growing up in Stafford, being in college in the early 70s, I've seen it all. I've seen very successful marijuana users. I do not believe it is a gateway drug. I feel alcohol is far more destructive to families and individuals. Marijuana does not cause addiction. I've been a registered nurse for over 40 years also. Addictive personalities will find what they want, whether they start with beer, pills, cigarettes, marijuana, whatever. It's not the gateway drug that a lot of people in my generation and older felt it was. So I don't think we need to have moral concerns about this. This is for adults. This is not for teenagers. Adults are allowed to buy cigarettes in town, liquor, vaping products. Marijuana is legal. They should be allowed to buy it here as well. One big advantage is keeping the weed clean. It's a whole lot safer than people going out and buying street marijuana that can be laced with anything, and lately we've seen the fentanyl and how dangerous that is. I would much rather see controlled cultivation where responsible adults can use it safely. And I also, after listening to some things, I think statistics can be used to support whatever your opinion is. I would imagine that I can find statistics about crime due to hard drugs and alcohol just as well as you could find statistics due to the use of marijuana.
Thank you, Joan.
Thank you.
Any other comments this evening?
I know I already spoke, I just have a quick question. The survey that you mentioned, when you talked about percentages of the responses, was that the percentage of all respondents, both the folks that claim to be residents and non-residents, or was it the answers given for residents only?
Yeah, good question. With regards to the responses we received, which is approximately 701, 24 were not residents.
And again, just to Mr. Thayer's point, I mean, these are self-identified folks, so we did not verify whether or not they were residents. I mean, you could have lied, but it's just one data point, you know, it's just one tool that we use, so.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Rick Collins, Avery Road.
Could you get to the microphone? We
Well,
we can't hear
him on the microphone.
We just need it for the tape recording, yeah, we need it for the recording.
Avery Road?
Rick Collins.
Yes, I'm definitely opposed to sales and cultivation. I think there's enough shortage of farmland to grow food that we need. We have plenty of problems with that. And as far as I know, from everything I've read, marijuana is a gateway drug. There's nothing to dispute that, it's been proven. Another thing is, for anybody that's interested, it's gonna be just as bad as cigarettes. And I can't do anything about cigarettes. That's been going on for a long time. Anything that you ingest into your lungs, other than oxygen, you're asking for problems. And I do think that any amount of money that comes from the state will be, much too small to take care of the problems that'll exist. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Susan Peck, 91 Skyridge Drive, Summers. First of all, I'd like to say I was very disappointed when I went to the town website and saw a random survey. I felt like it wasn't scientific. We didn't know if we were from town or not. None of us, well, maybe some people, before they did the survey, they researched all the facts before they answered that survey, but I doubt it. I feel like everybody in the room tonight has a lot more information now than when we came in.
Good
So
point.
I hope you don't use that survey for anything, but that's my opinion. For those of you that weren't here before this meeting, the Board of Selectmen meeting, the Social and Youth Services Director asked for $198,000 for youth services and social services for counseling and help for our youth of the town. And I don't know how to say it. So yes, we're only going to be selling pot, cannabis, marijuana, to people over 21, but that doesn't mean it won't be in the house with the children. So there's that to add to any of the other social problems that we have going on in town. I noticed, and I have a question for the town attorney. We don't have to vote on on recreational marijuana, do we?
No, actually, the town has to take some kind of action, either banning it or regulating it through the zoning regulations. If they don't do anything, at some point in the future, you have to at least let one retailer in your town.
Right.
So
But
you have to do something.
I felt like Selectman Meyer thought we were gonna have to have a vote. Was that what you thought?
Well,
No,
No,
we
okay,
could potentially have a referendum, so to your point about the survey,
Yeah,
the survey is not scientific, a referendum would be.
Right,
You know,
I
so
get
if we
that,
held a
yeah.
town
Okay, I
referendum,
just didn't know if you
we would
realized
actually
that
have,
we could make a decision before
Yeah.
we had to go to referendum, unless it becomes a big issue in
Yeah.
town and we end up having to have a vote.
You
yeah.
have to have a petition, the 10% of the
Right, I
vote.
got that.
I think that's what some towns have done. They've, for instance, through a, ordinance, passed a prohibition, which basically sets up a situation where you can ask for a referendum after that to follow.
Right, so, I don't know how much research you guys have done, and I haven't done a lot of research either, but we talk about farmland, I don't think the marijuana's gonna be grown in the ground
You're
in
right.
town.
You're right.
So it's not like being farmed in that manner.
That's time.
More like a greenhouse.
Yes, but a secure greenhouse.
Right.
Like,
It's
You
going
would hope
to,
so, considering that maybe all the tobacco that was grown here, and we don't know how many chemicals were put in the
Right.
ground.
yeah, well,
And-
they just don't grow it, that's not.
And I don't know if it's true, but I've heard rumors that from some doctors, they believe that the, reason why we have a high incident of brain cancer in this state, and I know 5 people that I know, and one just recently died last fall here in town, that they think that the tobacco fertilizers and other things we put in the ground has caused brain cancer.
Sure, yeah. So, part of my concern was somebody else's concern. Who in our town is going to monitor this if it comes here? Is it gonna be the Board of Selectmen's job to go monitor it? Is it gonna be the police department, the state police? Is that another job for them? Whose desk is it gonna come to all the time when, it says that it's state regulated, but still there's gonna be some town involvement? And is that gonna cost the town money? And it's not gonna be able to be part of our 3% that we get back from the state, because we're gonna have to use it for other things. So, at this point, I am against the retail sale and growing of marijuana in Summers. Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.
If I could comment at this time,
Sure.
Mr. First Selectman?
Want to use the microphone?
No, well, yeah, I need me to record. So just, for the record, Carl Landolino, so just to be clear, in terms of a path forward, these are the options that the state has given you. Do nothing, and you must allow, at least in Summers because of your size, one retailer who can set up shop anywhere where other retail sales are allowed. And that would be typically in your business section, all right, including your village zone. Number 2 is the zoning commission, on its own volition, could adopt a zoning regulation banning the sale and cultivation of marijuana in the town of Summers. That's path number 2. Path number 3 is the Board of Selectmen, on its own volition, could adopt an ordinance banning the sale of retail sales of marijuana or cultivation of marijuana in town, or allowing one and not the other. And if you would allow one or not the other, it would then go back to the zoning commission to draft a regulation to determine under what circumstances, where this operation could take place, so on and so forth. Or the next path would be for the Board of Selectmen to put this out for a referendum vote. They could do that on their own and say, we're gonna hold a town meeting, and then we're gonna continue that town meeting to a referendum vote. That town meeting would then serve as sort of like a public hearing on the issue. Or, the next path forward, I suppose, is that 10% of your voters, and I know, Bob, you probably have a better idea than anybody what 10% would mean, how many voters are in, registered voters in town.
I haven't looked at the number recently, but that could, 600, I would say, maybe.
So it's about 6,000 registered voters.
I think so, that's what it was, but I haven't seen the numbers in 3
So,
months, so.
if someone were to submit a petition with 600 signatures on it, just like any petition, it has to follow a certain form. You can't sign a petition online to do these kinds of things. Someone's gonna have to stand out in front of Geisler's and do that, but it's certainly doable. So those are your paths forward. Those are your options. So just to make that clear. And in terms of I guess, Sue, you asked the question about enforcement. Well, I would say if you look at this like a package store or a bar, that's how the enforcement would work. The first line of enforcement would be the local community, i.e. your police force. And then the Department of Consumer Protection has the right to pull a permit, just like they could pull a permit for a package store license or any kind of a bar for serving underage people, that kind of thing. So, but the first line of enforcement would be the town through its police force, and then if enough complaints, I guess, were filed to DCP, they could pull the retailer's license. Thank you.
Thanks for the explanation, Carl, very helpful.
Carl, I had just a statement or question that may or may not be relevant to everyone involved.
Okay.
Currently, if somebody came to the town to open a retail store, is it true or false that right now, we would have to we'd have to allow it under our current regulations as a similar use? In other words, the smoke shop.
No, that's not accurate. You have a certain amount, and I can't tell you the date. There is a drop dead date.
Right, that's what I was trying to look
I
up.
think it's
Yeah.
2024, I believe.
I think it's July 1st, 24, but I don't, it may be earlier than that. But there is a drop dead date.
Allow one, so if we don't make a decision before.
For whatever the drop dead date is.
They can come in
That's right.
as a 7-Eleven or whatever.
And whatever, in the zoning commission, if it was a retail use, would probably just be by zoning permit perhaps, not even, there certainly probably wouldn't be a public hearing on it.
Right.
It'd either by zoning permit or site plan.
Okay,
Right.
thank you.
Any other comments this evening?
Quick question.
Yes.
If it were to go to the zoning department, could something be drafted where, say, a grower was allowed, could we set a tax rate for that? Like a special tax rate, like, yeah, 3%, that's what the state says, we're saying 50% in our town, is that possible?
No.
Okay.
Good idea.
Let's try.
So we were to collect property tax on the assessed value of the property, then 3% of the sale. So, but yeah, we're not allowed, like New York City has a sales tax in their city, we're not allowed to assess a sales tax here in Summers, other than this exception they just gave us for marijuana. We
Right.
could not charge a general sales tax otherwise, like any penny. So.
Right, thank you.
Is there a cap on the tax?
3%.
3%.
So you'd have, if you were a retailer, there would be the 6.35% sales tax that always applies, and a 3%. So there'd essentially be a 10% tax on going into a retailer and buying whatever, a nickelback, somebody said earlier, of marijuana, which probably wouldn't cost $5 anymore. It would probably cost $150.
Yes, sir.
My name is Roger Barbosa. I live at 136 Turnpike Road. I came here with an open mind, probably leaning more towards a cultivator versus a retailer, or maybe both. But after hearing what everybody is saying, both the pros and cons, I just feel like we're going to be opening up a Pandora's box if we allow either one to come in. And I'm now leaning towards saying no to both operations. I don't think it's worth the 3%. I think it's gonna end up costing us more in the long run for whatever unforeseen circumstances or expenses that are gonna come up.
Thank you, Roger.
Thank you.
Mr. Marty, Town Clerk.
David Marty, I live at 50 Springfield Road. Basically, my position's kind of neutral, that as far as having both establishments. But I really feel that it's not economically viable. I don't think there's any retailer of a cannabis establishment that would want to come to Summers. There's just not the traffic. If we can't support a pharmacy in this town, how are we going to support a dispensary? It just doesn't make sense. So I just don't think anybody would want to be it. If you wanted to open a pot store, you want to be where the people are. And if we think where the people are, where there's gonna be pot stores, that they're gonna come to our, and out in the country to buy their pot, that's not gonna happen. But, I mean, I'd rather have a pharmacy here and have a winery up and open than be worrying about this. So that's my comment.
Maybe we put a sign in the Enfield one that says, buy here.
Drugstore,
I have a question.
You wanna ask at the microphone? Thank you.
How you doing? Mike Streeter, Scully Road. Is the sale at the dispensaries and at the growers, is it cash only, like other states?
I have no idea how that'll be
So
operated.
there's a bill before Congress to change this, but I mean, because it's still a
Because it's
Schedule
illegal
One,
in-
federally Schedule One, there are banking regulations that apply. So I believe federally chartered banks, they have trouble dealing with Schedule One. If it's a state charter bank, I think there's different rules, but that's a complex web.
Because I'm in the security business, and the states where I do business with, cannabis dispensaries
Yeah.
need a lot of security because
They're
it's
cash heavy
cash only.
businesses. Yes,
I
they
was
are.
just in Seattle,
They are.
last week, and down the road from the hotel was a dispensary, cops smash and grab.
They're cash, very cash
Yeah,
dependent.
okay, thank you.
Thank you for those questions. Anyone else?
So I guess the other path too, Carl, that we, would be, we could prohibit it now, but then at a later time, we could change our mind and allow it, correct?
Yes,
So if we decide to say to prohibit it, 5 years from now, it's not like it's a final decision for a future board, it could then be allowed.
absolutely, yes.
Okay.
Or you could also prohibit it and a referendum could be petitioned.
That's true.
Yeah, so if you were to, let's say, for example, the Board of Selectmen decided to adopt an ordinance banning the sale at retail and micro cultivation of marijuana. First, under your charter, it could be, that decision could be taken to a referendum with a petition. Under anything you guys do in terms, the ordinance you passed tonight, that's possible that somebody, so you could do that. But once you ban it, doesn't mean it's banned forever. You can, certainly, the town or the, it would take a vote by the, if it was done by ordinance, it would take a vote by the Board of Selectmen to repeal the ordinance, because
Right.
repeal of an ordinance is done the same way that you adopt an ordinance. And you'd have to do that, and you would do that in coordination with the zoning commission and say, hey, we've thought about this for 3 years. Whatever, Stafford's got this brand new, whatever, ambulance, I don't know. And we're thinking about, like what happened in Manchester, right? The Buckland Mall could have been in South Windsor, they said, no, we don't want the traffic. They built it in, Manchester, South Windsor still got the traffic, and they said, oh, we gotta do something now, and lo and behold, we had Evergreen Walk. So, I don't know, and the times can change, yes, if you ban it, you can permit it, but once you permit it, you get your 1 and 1, and cross your fingers that the state doesn't say, now we're gonna open it up to anybody. And then you could have 2 or 3 of them. I don't see them, it's like with, liquor permits for package stores, there's a limit based upon population. So that's how it's gonna eventually work out. What that means for Summers, who can say?
Thank you.
But I do get paid to give advice once in a while, not just, so, it seems
Great,
to me
we're
that
paying you
this.
by the clock here, I guess.
Yeah. You know what, it did take me 2 hours to drive here from Windsor. But unless you're sure that you want this, it seems the safest path is to ban it. And if you wanna reopen the issue in the future, you have the right to do that. But unless you're positive that this is something you want.
And the state's been very clear that we would not receive the first permit anyway. I mean, they're going to population dense centers.
No question, yeah, I mean, that's, you've got Hartford, Bridgeport, Stamford, all the, so, yes. it could take, even if you were to allow, it could take a year before someone could get a permit here possibly.
And just so folks, just so everyone understands too, today is only an informational session, this is not even a public hearing. So if there were further action contemplated by the Board of Selectmen, that would then involve another public hearing. So there'd be another opportunity to come and speak, other people could come out, you could submit written testimony, things like that. So I mean, today we kind of see it as kind of the beginning of the process. We're not at the end yet, so, this is just kind of another step in our town's decision as to what we're gonna do.
But also, I'd like to add, very important input though, so we very much appreciate people coming out tonight and presenting their point of view and asking questions and hopefully leaving with more information than you came with. Thank you very much. Terminates tonight's meeting.
Is there anything else? Is there anybody else? Oh.
Okay.
I have a quick question for Carl. So the towns get 3% of the retail or micro growers. Do you happen to know how much the state takes from that retailer or micro grower?
So they're gonna get the sales tax of 6.35%, I think that's how they're gonna treat it, but I think that the permit fees will be a little bit more than, let's say, if you're getting a permit fee for a package store. So they'll be getting those fees and you know, eventually, depending on how it goes, the state's gonna say, well, let's increase the taxes on the sale of marijuana.
I think the permit fee is somewhere around $20,000.
It could be substantially high, yeah, it's certainly, so.
Great. Thank you. That, I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
There's no one else? Okay. Al, second it? Yep.
Seconded.
Okay.
Can we do a show of hands, pro and con, tonight?
Sure, if you want.
Should feel good.
The selectmen aren't gonna vote, right?
No, we're not taking a vote tonight, there's no vote.
Yeah.
We did not notice.
Why is Tim so interested in voting? I don't even.
Well, I don't think, I don't think it makes any difference, really. We've had comments, we've received them, I'm not sure, I mean, I think it's we've got, the value added were the comments that we received, not really the raise of hands whether you support it or not, so.
I mean, we don't have a representative group in the room either, so it's tough for us to judge our decision, number one, based on the survey, number two, based on who comes out. But, I mean, I think if the path was a referendum, then that would be a kind of a representative. So, I mean, I don't know what the feelings are on a referendum, but I mean, that would be something that would be scientific, essentially, and binding. I'm sorry?
We think we're representative.
I don't know if 40 people does it.
Yeah, because we care, we showed up.
No, thank you, and the input.
Very much appreciate that, it really very valuable,
Makes a difference.
great way to kick off the process here. Thank you very much, tonight's meeting is over.
Thank you for